We are now in section 5, partners and suppliers. So this is one of the dimensions of this practice. For the exam, we need to understand the role of partners and suppliers in this practice, which means we should explain or know the dependencies of the practice on third parties and also how the partners and suppliers can support this practice. We know that very few services are delivered using only an organization's own resources. Many depend on services from third parties. And let's see how these third parties can play a key role in this practice. So we take a look at the dependencies on third parties in this practice. So the integration of the service provider with an organization in both upstream and downstream work requires effective coordination of the practice between the members of the service relationship ecosystem. So what does this mean? So let's say I'm a consumer organization. I'm working with a couple of third parties for this practice. I need to make sure that this work contributes properly to any value streams of the organization. And because value streams involve different teams, different levels of management, so this integration should happen properly. Otherwise, the value streams will be disturbed by the introduction of third parties. And it just like a simple example, third parties will bring in their own procedures, or they'll bring in their own information, or they may need access to certain information. So all that needs to be considered. Now, the exact level of coordination depends on the type of relationship, service relationship. For example, it could be a basic relationship or a cooperation or a partnership. And as we know, if the relationship is more closer, like a real partnership, and the trust will be more, and therefore more configuration information can be shared and more management activities can be performed together. But the minimum is the moment third parties are brought in, some configuration data needs to be shared. So it should be clearly understood as to what is that minimum data that will be shared with the third party. And maximum, when there's a high level of trust, then there can be a wider sharing of the entire CMS as well, and better integration with the third party. Sometimes there may be some critical services with some confidential, highly confidential information, such as banks, for example. They may not share everything with a third party. Now, what kind of support third parties can perform? As we have seen earlier, third parties will need access to the CMS or certain data within the CMS to provide their roles, to fulfill their roles effectively. So the integration of the third parties to the right extent is required. Now, having understood that, let's see what they can be involved in as third parties. They can be involved in the service provider's value streams in various roles. And sometimes these roles will be using the configuration information. Sometimes the third-party roles will be updating the configuration information. So this should be done in line with the CI lifecycle models and should be agreed in contracts with the partners and suppliers as to how they will be, up to what extent they will be using and updating the configuration information. So it should not be a free-form access to the third party for all the configuration information of the consumer or a service provider, in case the service provider is also using other third parties. Now, the partners and suppliers can also do another thing. They can advise the service provider on how to develop this practice, particularly the approach for the practice, and to review the approach. And they can also advise the service provider for the integration of tools and for the verification of the CMDB. So what we are mainly seeing here is that it is a service provider who is working with the third parties. But of course, sometimes the consumers will themselves work, or a customer will directly work with several third parties for this practice. And then the other thing that the third parties can do is supply the automation tools, which is also very important for this practice because of the enormous amount of data that builds up. So they can provide their own CMS tools, inventory and discovery tools, and the workflow management and collaboration tools. Again, it is important that these tools are certified by certain standard bodies, ITSM bodies, whoever they are, so that the organization will be assured about the functionalities from these tools and that they are safe and secure. Then integration of tools, we have seen the importance of that. That is important once again. And there are some specialized vendors who are good at system integration. So there could be an organization working with supplier A who provides a tool, the organization themselves having another tool, and the third-party integrator can come in and integrate those two tools. But usually integrators will come in when there are too many different tools from different vendors, and there are some tools from the organization as well. So make sure you're clear about these things for the exam. In the next section, number 6, we will be taking a look at the capability assessment model of ITIL 4 and how it works for this practice. Thank you.